This is Contemporary Communications Conference. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today we welcome Bob Dobbs and Phil Chamberlain.
I'm preoccupied, I have to be honest with you. There's something sort of semi-obsessive here. And that's this to-do that's coming down around the discoveries on that Mars rock. It has to do with the fact that my now roommate Rick has written a massive piece exposing the fact that what he calls Mar Rock is perhaps a missile hurled to Earth by the one and true God. But this is not merely, a scientific exercise in uncrusting these low critters, but that there are metaphysical implications. There's the transcendence of Yahweh, who after all is responsible for the creation of life on Earth in 7 days. But that doesn't include the creation of life on Mars, so according to this logic, there's a transcendental being under which Yahweh and all other gods are subsumed. And since my friend goes on to say, I will just tell you that the problem of existence on Earth has been too many gods. We have the god of fire, the god of sky, the earth god, the Gaia, the goddess, the goddess Sita, who is my contribution to the God stream of thinking. So I just had to get that off of.
But what's the story? I don't know. When did this happen? What are you talking about? This Mara Rock?
Oh dear, you haven't read the news, the front pages for
Not
the
in
last
weeks.
2 days?
No, we're out of touch.
Oh, I wish I had the numbers. Something like HG7803B. I just made that up.
Okay,
That's what it's designated.
It's coming toward us?
It landed in Antarctica 13 million years ago. It was discovered in 82, I believe it was, but they only recently, like 6 months ago, Caltech and Stanford have decided that something like 90% of the experts' opinion is that the content inside this little cantaloupe-sized rock has the content of it includes microbial life. Now dead.
Right.
But the tubular and sort of round, they describe as a bacteria-like biota. Okay.
Which means there's life on Mars? Is this the point, or what?
Well, it was.
Yeah, that's the big thing. They got some kind of evidence.
Yeah, they think it was blown off of there by a meteor that struck Mars. It flew off in fragments, and they figure 4.5 billion years ago, which is very at the earliest phases. That was the.
So this is Thompson's. It's the thesis that life came here. Fred, whatever that guy's name is.
Rick, Francis.
Dyson. Rick. That the life came here. This is evidence for that
This
thought.
plays right into it.
I see.
Also plays into Carl Sagan's. He's keen on.
So this is what's happened, and your friend is saying that it's a missile from God.
Well, yeah, that's his take on it.
Yeah.
I mean, exploring it from he's sort of a poet.
Yeah.
And an engineer.
Okay, I got the context.
And an atheist.
Okay.
I think he's undergoing. This is his road to Damascus experience. I'm a believer. Mar-Rock, he calls it.
Okay, so you're talking about. Okay, now there's all these gods that are here. Now you can develop that thought.
Well, here's an interesting concept. I mean, you can be here in time, or you can be here in space, or you can be here in what they now call cyberspace, which might be nowhere or everywhere. So God's being here yeah. My thing is, see,
Life is trying
Look,
to
and
attack.
I'll tell you this: you're going to be hearing about this from already. That you should read the last 2 days, just front pages. There's a half dozen articles in both of the last two, just the LA Times, and it's so totally compelling because if this is true, life on Mars, oh, a Lovelock, right back before they sent up the Viking landers, he told them that there was no life on Mars. He told them way ahead of time because, he and Lynn Margulis, Lynn had explained how the oxygenation of the atmosphere was because of the bacterial, bacteria give off oxygen, and that's how we got an oxygen. And he looked up there and he found that there was no atmosphere that would suggest life. If there was even bacterial life, there would be oxygen. And, he was an atmosphere scientist, so they'd given up on it. They went with the lander, dug up, analyzed. They got in-depth profile composition of the soil. There's nothing bionic in it whatsoever, and so people have really given up. And they got a moon. Mars projects going on in December. In a month or two, and then one in December. They got two going up. One is going to fly all around and map the place. It's called a surveyor. And the other one's, what's the other one going to do? It's going to do other tests, I suppose, to feel up the atmosphere and so forth. So, and the other argument is that, well, this is all those Caltech people. They've taken this piece of rock and they've made themselves project into it all of this lifelike content, because they want more funding. So, and so here, my point is, you're going to see an endless, first of all, an outflow from the science community. They don't want their grants, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is great for prying loose monies.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, okay, from the reactionary right, you're going to see all of this. There's already a couple of quotes in the press by fundamentalists who don't know anything about it, are saying it can't be because that would deny the uniquitude, if it might use, of life on Earth. I mean, is that ass backwards reasoning? You start with your metaphysical position and assert that the physical evidence must be denied. I mean, that's their mode. I mean, that's how they deal with evolution in the gross, because...
So there's a big debate that's flared up about what this is.
Well, sure, you can hear it from the right that way. You can hear it from the religious, the liberal religions, like my friend Rick is mocking liberal religion.
Right.
People are going to find some more evidence of God in this, or a broader scope of God. And, isn't creation, the 7 days included creating life on which day? Probably it was the fourth day, because you can look at astrology and tell it falls right here in the house of,
And then the Gaians will say,
oh, well, now that's a whole nother...
Margulis and Lovelock.
No, there's got to be, Gaia's getting a sister, okay? Gaia is on the Earth. Uranus gave birth to Gaia.
Right.
Now, perhaps Mars, but probably not Mars, but in some mythological construction. I mean, if you now have, or at least had, a life-bearing planet on Mars, however many millennia ago, then just as they fancied up the name Earth or world or the terrestrial sphere, and they gave it this mythological name. So because there's life there, that should happen. But beyond that, the entire solar system now deserves to, see, that's a science name, that's an engineering system, systematic general systems theory, electrical system, the hydraulic system, the planetary system? Well, the solar system. You know, that's a science name. I mean, it's never been adorned with that verbal output through mythos. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, so again, as they may adorn, as Mars is ripe for adornment with a mytho-poeticized appellation,
Yeah.
so must the planetary system. And that's where Rick comes in. I mean, I think
Mar-Rock.
that's the metaphysical root ground that's got him going this way.
Mar-Rock. Mar-Rock. So that's what you've been preoccupied with.
No, I've been preoccupied with filling my van with household artifacts, taking them upstairs.
But you did say at the beginning another preoccupation was this story.
Yeah, to the extent I had time to.
So how does this relate to what we said before, TV or not TV? Or are we going into new territory here? Do you want to bring up anything? Or do you want to deny anything?
You mean in regard to the aforementioned stuff, or it's
what you said.
forward-looking?
Are we? What do you want? I haven't got a way to respond yet. Are we responding in relation to the first tape?
Well,
or
that can be
Finnegan's Wake?
that can be book one.
Yeah.
Now we could
Do book two.
Do book two.
But you're writing it at this point.
Well, you know, sometimes books are sequels to previous books, and you know, if you write enough books, I mean, a mere one sequel. If 3 is a trilogy, what is 2 books?
A tulip.
You know what it is? It's a diatribe.
Well,
Trilogy makes it metaphorical. You get the triangle, which becomes, oh, I'm off now, Phil. You get the triangle, which is Bucky Fuller says, you do not have consciousness or basic foundation for a universe till you get to the triangle, because you have an inside and outside, which then gets to reflection,
well,
which gets to metaphor. So 2 things is a diatribe, and the trilogy is metaphor.
you've scooped me, because that's what I'm getting at.
It's the ESP.
If we have a second book, that's not enough to close the
Right,
circle. You
yeah.
at least have to go 3 before it can come back and close itself. So this book 2 is only a way station to book 3,
Which may be the first tape, because we're both interacting. So far, you're leading book 1, and book 2, this thing. If you keep it, I have no way to respond, then I'll have to lead the 3rd one. And those 2 will be the 1 and 2, and the 3 will be the first tape we already did.
You got all your batteries in
right
right side up?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know what this has to do with me or what we've said so far yet.
Okay, there's no hole in your bucket.
No.
All right. All right, you're playing with your glasses.
I want to play the clarinet. It was the last time I jammed with you. You know?
Oh, how did that feel for you?
That was good.
That was fun, huh?
Last time I saw you drinking too.
Well, you haven't been with me consistently.
Yeah,
I
right.
can see that. Okay, what else? That's all in the direction of front page news. It just happens to be worth talking about.
Well, here's the thing in our relationship. The last thing you said to me was, Bob, I heard your Finnegan's Wake thing. It was good. There are a few points that I want to bring up. That's what we should begin, because that relates to me.
Oh, okay. Let's open that chapter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just recall what you would have said if you could have stayed around.
Okay, specific things. Like, well, I always fall back with the, okay, I see you as a classicist in a sense. I mean, like William Irwin Thompson I see as a classicist.
Yeah.
And, classicist means, in the sense I'm using it, that okay, you're in the orbit of the past. Your pole of orbit, your center of orbit, is what you might call history or culture or tradition or all that's ever been or everybody that ever was or there with everyone. Okay. Well, the true sense for me of here comes everybody. I mean, come is talking about future. Okay, something coming. I mean, went is talking that's in the past, right? Look, whoop, there it went. But if it's still coming, you're really talking about the future.
That's right.
So, but in practice, I find you very much one who exercises in the gymnasium of the past. Okay, I mean, your parallel bars are just to swing through the well, your changes. I mean, 1972 looms large in your gymnasium, and you swing from 72 to
77.
77. I mean,
and then up to 1990, which is the past. Goes from 60 to 90. Right, and this is 96, so.
Okay, so that's why the whole subject is boring to me about what's happening with the media until it gets to the point of
today
lending guidance, at least guidance for the future. If hey, that one cannot prescribe the future is an easily forgivable failure, perhaps not a failure at all.
Right.
However, other people do think that they can tell us, you know, what's coming. Like John Naisbitt, much as I find his sensibilities kind of crude, or this guy that works with Gingrich, you know, he's
Toffler and Drucker.
And no, Drucker I find less crude, but so this is not a criticism of anything that happened at that meeting. It's my general problem with taking all of this intense saturation into media studies when I'm always sitting on the edge of my chair saying, yes, and now what do we do? You know, I mean.
Well, I can answer that. I understand your point.
Is that a question?
Oh, very good question. Because the whole, you haven't read the essays, but there's hints of the present. So I am reflecting back. See, the chart is the view from the hexad. It's a hex advertisement. It says at the bottom, waiting for organic bodies, the spinning clothing crystals dance the hexad advertisement in brackets, hex advertisement. And you got the 5 stages.
I believe the pronunciation is hex advertisement.
Right, but I want to mention I'm making it hexad because you've got the monad, dyad, triad, tetrad, and pentad, and then it's a view from the decad. So what is, if that whole historical perspective of 1960 to 1990 is presented there, but it's presented from the hexad view, what is the hexad view? That's the present. The present is sitting on our right. And so I'm rewriting the last 30 years with the present and the future sitting on my right, on my left. Well, you're right, you know. And
I know I am.
What? And
I
she's
know I
right,
am.
so you're right. You're going to be right because she's on my left. This, which I'm not at liberty to talk about because it's not ready to be presented to the public on a mass scale. So what I've done is I've written these 2 parts of a manifesto and flip side, which are written from the perspective of the future, looking back at the implications of that new thing coming, and then reorienting the last 60 years, 60 to 90, from the perspective of what the breakthrough of her work means, and Pons and Fleischmann's work means for our perspective on the past. So the classicist is a cover for dealing with the present. Now, if we want to talk about deal with what's next, we have to turn the tape off and go over there.
Oh, okay, then, okay, your version of what's next, but, or I will yield that you would be talking about what in fact would be next.
Yeah.
But I would wish to pepper your stew of thought with the seasoning that comes out of the pepper mill of disarmament. See, as you know, as you well know, as you know perhaps ad nauseum, that you know, I'm a bit of a doctrinalist. I am doctrinaire. I think that's a good thing. Most people who've done anything, I mean, medical doctor, I'm not talking dogma. Dogma is like doctrine that's people have become corrupt into.
Yeah.
But a doctrine, I mean, all of us that punditize in any sense, you know, are having a dogma, a doctrine.
Yeah.
In my case,
It's my doctrine over there.
the doctrine of disarmament.
All right.
DOD also means the Department of Defense.
Well, do you feel that I don't understand your doctrine?
Oh, well, not understand is not quite the right way to express it,
Right.
really. And then in any case, I'm not sure if you understand it
The way you'd like it to be understood.
right.
That's doctrinal.
To the marrow of your dendrites or
Yeah.
something like that. Because you would talk about it more. Here's what constantly galls me, with everybody,
Yeah.
is holding forth in the public discourse.
By everybody. Yeah.
No, Marcus Raskin is a
Yeah.
doctrinal GCDer, and Richard Falk to an extent, and Saul Menlovitz definitely, and even Randall Forsberg, who circulated the call to the nuclear arms freeze in '81,
Yeah.
had paragraphs about general complete disarmament. Okay, so there are a few, but it doesn't work on certain people. Certain people that have other things working on them, they're in the grip, let's say in your case, to keep the discussion nice and tight,
Yeah.
people that are under the sway of the things that you are. I wouldn't even have to specify, but I mean, this conversation, anybody could sit in that chair and this would be true.
Yeah.
You under the sway of
Yeah.
what you're under, you know, you might be a women's liver, as they called it in the
Yeah.
70s, or you might be
A deep ecologist.
or a deep ecologist, or a rightist of some kind.
Right.
You're in the sway, I mean in the grip. Now if this were religion we're talking, if I were a Christian, I would say you're in the grip of the devil.
Right.
I'd say the devil's put his hands over your eyes. The devil is behind you.
Yeah.
He's like blinded you to the word of Christ.
Right.
Would be an extension of the metaphor.
But that's not what you. If you were a Christian, but you're not a Christian, so
No,
that's not, what would you say?
So I'd say I'm well.
You're a voice in the wilderness. You see everybody blinded.
God for me is the generation of discernment. Our purpose on earth is increasingly becoming to generate a global demilitarization. That is the sublime, maximum, zenith most keystone in the arc of intellect. And you fit in your own bricks around here.
Yeah.
Okay? You've got a brick or two, you might have the whole damn half of the wall up to the keystone. But what you fail to realize adequately is that the keystone, the keystone is really in fact going to be viewed back upon by the post-military generations as having been the intellectual breakthrough in all walks, in all forms of psychology, are going to become the psychology of what happens to human consciousness leading up to and then afterwards in a general disarmament, in a world demilitarized. Everything in religion is going to be shaped towards general and complete disarmament. When it starts to happen, people that are in the serving professions, like social workers and so forth, the whole thing about getting more money and eliminating the military, that's all going to stem, and GCD is going to be the what's the word?
Unifying.
The unifying principle, okay? Now, early elucidated by I think it's the early church of GOD, the globe of demilitarization, the global order demilitarized.
Yeah.
All these metaphors. I have a whole list. The letters, all the words that start with a G on one wheel, all the words that start with O on another wheel.
Right.
And all the words that...
Yeah, D.
And I spin these wheels. I can randomly.
Yeah.
And I give you a test. We'll go backwards. D. Name a word that starts with D. It could be dog, D, bopper. Name a word with a D.
It can be like Dylan.
Dylan.
A pronoun.
Okay. A
Dylan.
word with O. Starts with O.
Ozone.
Ozone, and a word that starts with G.
Garrett.
Garrett, ozone, Dylan. Now, you may think that doesn't make sense, but if you acronymize it, you've still got a God. And since those things are dear to you, each in their individual, then in their triumvirate, see, this is the Holy Trinity. These three words. Now, certain fundamentalists probably start beating me with their Bible about now.
Well, see, what you're implying that you were seeing the implication that we'd get a semantic chain no matter what words we picked. But then you dropped the semantic chain purpose and just said, oh, the initials are G-O-D. And that's what you always said. You were saying...
You set them up, Phil. You set Bob up.
Well,
But I want to get back to the
no,
global disarmament.
Wait, no, you didn't respond. The point is, he just said, you get 3 words and it'll mean something. I could say BCE,
Oh,
and it would be Brian Christian Era. Well, what it means is BCE, the acronym.
I didn't say they mean something. I simply said, look, this is called the acronymous God.
Is that your name?
No, acronymous means, born of an acronym.
Oh, okay.
So all of those were acronymous gods. They're all GODs. They don't necessarily have meaning.
Right.
Like, goodbye, Oliver Depp. I mean, there's not a whole lot of meaning there.
Well, but you're not talking about that. You're talking about the G-O-D.
No, now there are resonant, sparkly acronymous gods that there are 2 levels of meaning. One are they simply make meaning, like you say, going over directives.
Going over Dunkirk.
Okay. As well.
Yeah.
That has, semantic, logical meaning. Yeah. It's a sentence or a phrase that has. Okay, that's the first level. That can be anything, but that's not GCD. Now, the select acronymous gods are the ones that bear on GCD, on GCD,
yeah.
general and complete disarmament. Now, that is the ultimate. But you gotta say, instead of GCD, you say GOD, general overall disarmament, or global overall demilitarization.
Yeah.
So there are only a few Ds that I really like.
Yeah.
There are basically 2, demilitarization, disarmament. The O's can vary a lot. And the G's are generally global or general or generational or genetic, or the generation of demilitarization, which connotes of the people doing it. They are the God. If God
What's going to happen?
Well, there's an old lady walking through the Museum of the Demilitarization. She's about 104. She has a scraggy voice, and she's got some little children from school. And these children are 3rd and 4th generation born after, I call it D-Day, no confusion with the World War II. But D-Day was the day that they launched the peace bomb. The peace bomb being the means to shut down the command and control for all the military in the world to enable some space to bring down all the weaponry.
Right.
Okay.
And this woman says...
She says, children, please don't put your boogery fingers on the showcase windows, because behind that glass, on these, behind that glass are the icons of our deliverance from militarizedness, our deliverance from the days when people thought that the media and the message was somehow fraught with the metaphysical texture of which we weave the fabric of our...
And I would say that those icons are the first fusion technology machinery, because you can't take something away from someone who has a gun, especially if you want to take the gun away. You have to offer them something in return.
Great.
And that in return is the means by which they can attain the things that they think they're going after with the guns, which is limitless energy. So I think, personally, that I'm working toward general disarmament by pushing for fusion,
Okay,
because that's
how-
what
Okay.
it would
Th-
take.
that's
Let me
how the-
hold that, I wanna
but
supplement.
one little add-on, and that's how I mean the keystone is that every field of enterprise, eventually, if and when GCD ever happens, I can't promise you it will.
I promise it. I have it in my chart.
Now I feel better.
Yeah.
Now I can breathe easy.
But
But if it does, I will just tell you that railroad engineering is going to have a GCD dimension to it.
Yeah.
It's not clear to me exactly how. They're going to have to figure out how not to haul bombs to make money, or
Okay, Phil, I call it BOB because I have in my chart. I
the
got-
acronymous Bob.
That's right, or CON for Connie. But the thing is I have it on my chart. I have the flat line. This realm of disarmament happens in 2012, and I'm the president of the institution that implements that. I predict, and I have it gone public in the summer, in June '96. My chart is right there. 2012, me, and it's a flat line. It's unmeasurable. It's into the new zone of general disarmament,
I'll be 77. That's the same year as the.
which adds up to 14, so which is appropriate for your 14th zone here.
Right. Well, that's good news. I'm glad we jived, at least on the timeline.
Yeah. So, what is the woman? What are the
okay,
icons in the museum?
Okay, well, she's taking them through the. I think of it as the. Well, it's the Hall of Heroes of
Yeah,
Disarmament. Okay.
Will you be in it?
It's that is not been revealed on planet. at
But
this
you
point.
think you should, because you have the guts or
I-
gall to tell it.
I
Say
could-
everybody else is missing this point.
I could well be a fallow seed fallen on rocky soil,
Right.
destined not to bear much fruit. I well could be.
Yeah.
But someone that thinks a lot like me and has a doctrine.
Absorbs your meme.
Well, they wouldn't even have to absorb mine. I mean, if Marcus Raskin got something going, it could
Yeah.
well proceed without me. I would just simply sit back and applaud.
Yeah.
Yay, GCD! I always knew it. I always said that was.
Yeah.
Okay, it would be something like that. But the people in the Hall of Heroes are, well, Misters McCloy and Soren are in there.
Yeah.
They're depicted, and they're done in bronze, done up rather big, and they have between them, they got this, they're in bronze, but between them they have this document in gold, shiny gold, and it's real gold. This
Yeah.
Museum of the Millennium, as
Yeah.
it's called, the Millennium.
Yeah.
Everybody gets the joke. I'm glad of that. Sometimes they don't always get
Yeah,
that.
they don't. They don't.
Oh, we're playing with a swift crew today, so we.
Yes, we can move faster.
It's MOM, Museum of Millennium.
Mom.
The acronymous mom.
Yeah. Gaia or Connie or whatever you want to call it, right?
Geo-Earth Mother.
And who can guess what this document is that they have between them?
Oh, it's the one that you uncovered.
Misters McCloy and so
Yeah,
on.
the one that you uncovered from 1960. What was the year?
It's 62.
62, yeah.
It's September 2nd, I believe, was 62.
That's the document, right?
The McCloys are in
Yeah,
agreement,
yeah.
so-called in history. Its title is
You know, 6 weeks before the Cobra crisis.
it's called the basis for negotiating. No, it's called principles for negotiating general fleet disarmament.
Yeah.
Which is very big kickoff point for that. So they will be there, and of course, some of John McCloy's more unseemly side will not be presented
Highlighted.
to these children. After all, he's the guy singularly without whom there would have been no internment of the Japanese
Yeah.
during World War II.
John Day
he's-
McCloy?
Yeah,
and he
he
failed
met-
in some ways. He failed in the denazification program.
Oh, in some ways he did fail. In some big ways he
Yeah.
did fail. He let that whole paperclip thing.
And then he worked with Rockefeller for so many decades.
Oh, well, not to mention having founded the Chase Manhattan Bank
Yeah.
and set its policies, and be the chairman of the foreign policy group, what they call it,
The Council of Foreign
the Council
Relations.
on Foreign Relations, and Yeah, yeah, I mean, if you think those are like sinful activities, or
Well, do you think? Yeah, do you think his document then represents his infiltration of the system? He worked within the system and then pulled that homeopathic cliche probe out?
you're going to have to ask that question again because I'm not sure which side you're on. I mean, was he in the system or outside in
Yeah.
regard to what
Okay,
background?
if
Was
he's
he the-
honored and we're ignoring his associations, historical associations, and he's honored for that point, and we then emphasize, oh, look at all the badness he was involved with, but he did this, then that all the badness he had to do to infiltrate to get to say this document.
I don't think so. I think it's simpler and more heartening and more encouraging what happened. It's simply that he was on Stimson's. He was Stimson's number 2 guy for throughout the entirety of World War II.
Yeah.
But as was Grenville Clark, the theoretician of this whole thing, who wrote the book World Peace Through World Law, who showed how he put on the left-hand side of each page the verbatim articles of the UN Charter. On the other half of the page, he put how each charter article would need to be changed for the UN Charter to conduce to general and complete disarmament.
Right.
He was, Root Clark was his law firm. Root, Elihu Root's son. I mean, these are not pacifist people.
Right.
I mean, these are the big time. This is the big.
Brown and Root after Vietnam, after the Kennedy assassination, they're the ones that made the money on the market.
The construction company.
Yeah.
Is that the same Root, Elihu Root?
Maybe. I'm assuming it is.
Probably ultimately. So, the point is, what's so heartening that this out and out war hawk guy who could fight and beat Nazis.
Yeah.
He was a pretty cold person. He could summarily incarcerate citizens of the United States with not a strip of evidence in any way, and not concern himself about it. The person on that stripe can still look at things on the ground and say, would really serve the world well is if we could have general and complete disarmament. So but now that Warhawk can have that perception. No, he was some infiltrator. No, he was just one of that club, as was Grenville Clark, who provided the big theoretical push for that. Both of them served on Stimson's staff throughout the war, except 6 months before the end of the war, Stimson told Grenville, just look, go back to New Hampshire, you've served this well in the war, figure out how to get the peace. And Grenville Clark came out with a series, it's a couple of books, one is called Plan for Peace, a volume I have a copy of. And then in '58 he came out with World Peace Through World Law, which itemized a lot of theoretical content about general complete disarmament, how it has to be complete, meaning down to the last man. In general, meaning it had to apply to every country, general and complete disarmament. These are serious thinkers that gave rise to negotiations at the UN in the 18 Nation Disarmament Conference. These were serious people. This was not merely propagandistic. Yeah, the U.S. got lured into it because they didn't want to look less peace-mongering than the Soviets. But like Sorensen says in his book Kennedy, once Kennedy was into it, he became a believer. He got swept up in the logic of it. But if you read Kennedy's book, A Plan for Peace, his campaign propaganda piece for 1960 for the campaign, there's not a reference to general and complete disarmament. And by then it was old news already, because Eisenhower had ratified a UN resolution in '59 for general and complete disarmament. So, there was a propagandistic element to it, but there's also this hard realpolitik thinking type people who realize that, well, hey, if we could just sit down and do this, that is the way to go, because they knew that economies can function without militaries, that all that crap in Iron Mountain is just a bunch of garbage.
So why hasn't it happened yet?
Because of guys like you.
Fusion.
All right, no, you hear what he
Fusion
said?
hadn't
Because of
come.
guys like me.
But guys like you, like I said, you could be every
And
man.
you
any
mean
man.
because of other people?
You-
Because of people not being Phil?
No, because of people, they've all, the devil of history, the
Yeah.
devil of the past, which has not taught us about disarmament. The
Right.
past, we're here. Each country's here, it survived through warfare. Most countries were born out of warfare, like the 4th of July.
Right, that's right. Canada's unique in not having had that experience. McLuhan used to talk about
So
that.
it is so deeply in the average person.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it just breaks me up. It's like, it's a total warfare thing, and
Yeah.
everybody's in a grip of it. And even people who would were others already doing it on a broad scale, they would naturally go for it. I don't think you're an evil intending person who would wish.
I represent everybody. Here comes
continue-
everybody.
Continuing warfare.
I'm
on
HCE,
the world.
right?
Yet your guiding pole star is not the capstone up here that everybody must.
I just told you, it's in my chart. I'm actually, I've gone public with it. I'm reaching, I don't know how many people you've reached, but I've reached with that situation. I've shown the future, the flat line in 2012. Many people think it's Terence McKenna's
Now,
disappearance.
Well, let's get back to this now. How reconcile 2012 flat line with my stuff on
Yeah.
Demilitarized World?
It's not a flat line, but there's all these categories, on the chart, and then you get to this bottom left-hand corner, and you might want to get it. We can show it, and you'll see a line, and it's my way of trying to show the ineffable, the immanentizing of the eschaton, which is what McKenna calls it. The keystone. The keystone is my way of expressing the keystone, which I understand you're
okay,
expressing.
eschaton is beautiful. I mean,
No, it's the other chart.
Okay, but
The other
see,
chart.
but where do you GCDize your eschaton? That's your mission.
You know why? Because the chart consists of the characters in history of the last 220 years are tools and weapons. I have the word weaponry right in the thing. And it's the whole interaction of weaponry, the past, the devil, and the punchline is a non-technological term, non-weaponry term. I think you'll agree with the chart when you see it.
It's a non-weapon return.
Yeah, a non-weaponry term.
Oh, no. Oh.
Non-technological, non-war-making tool.
Well, I have other evidence that you're basically there, but you haven't really fully. You're in metaphase or something like or late teleophase when a cell divides. You like are sort of almost broken with it, but you haven't.
Well, that's because I'm the holopathic cliche probe that retrieves the McCloy-Zorn pact and presented as theater.
Right on. Retrieves the McCloy-Zorn.
And recapitulates it and realizes it, but theatrically, so that it is not me I'm referring to. I'm pointing out what happens. In other words, it's Christ-like, taking on the sins of the world. Look at this chart. You can there's half the stage and the other half. There's the actors: technological cultural enemy, technological weaponry, technological / weaponry, and then the culture lag. All these are tools, media, interacting and fighting with various lockdown, militarized attempts to get control. The last phase is down here, and it's manifested by me only as a culture lag of what had already happened by McCloy-Zorn
Where
between 1990 and 2020.
would McCloy-Zorn appear on this graph?
That would be this period, Kennedy, 1960.
Okay. And what's the meaning of this entry? 1900 to 1918.
Okay.
Lockdown, half world government.
Right, well, basically, these are the top-down bureaucratic ground, causes merging with effects. Basically, that's how man organized himself in relation to the effects of the various tools. So a new weapon would come in, and then they have to reorganize society, have a few wars to adjust to the new super weapon. So this is 220 years of super weapons.
Well, okay, I will take your word for it that it's there, but you see my problem. If somebody handed me this, I'd say, I'd look at it through my
Frames, yeah.
frames, and I'd go,
Right.
because it wouldn't be obvious that It's not
in your frame
obvious.
terms.
In
It's not
my,
obvious.
my terms, it doesn't communicate in the way you say it means.
No, if you read it, if you just looked at it, you wouldn't get it. But it's like Mandela. If you study it, you'd see, look, how the media archetypes fit the Battle of Jericho in American politics. That's when all the walls are knocked down. This is the knocking down of the walls, and there's the punchline, which is me. But I'm a homeopathic cliche probe, which goes back here to 1960 to 77, but epitomized in culture lag terms 1960, which is replay of 1945, which is where John McCoy comes out of. He's the guy assigned it after 45. That's when he gets in control in 45.
Well, why can't me be me and everybody else?
It may be, because when you read it, it is you. You read me.
Well, I would...
Got him. Got him.
I like the E in HCE.
Yeah.
I mean, that everybody.
Yeah, you like HCE. Well, the point is that that's a familiar thing, and HCE is this. There's HCE up there.
Right. Well,
see, right up there.
maybe. Now, is it conceivable that there will be amendments to this document?
Yeah, that's what that chart is. That chart is the amendment process on the way to get to 2012. In other words, the fake classicism, the fake historical perspective on an event that already happened in 1990. Remember, it's already happened in 1990, and it's going to, in that 30-year period, it crystallized because of the culture lag principle in 2012 through me.
Well, I want to say I certainly hope so.
But I've gone out on a limb. I'm pushing for it.
Well, okay, but the fact remains
Right there.
that of the numerous, or at least the several hours of disquisition I've enjoyed,
With me?
you sharing
Yeah.
with me and generally others
In overtime or the previous tape?
at various times.
Yeah, on the bench.
And yeah.
You never heard me talk about it in your terms.
I've never heard you talk about it in terms that sounded like you were really rooted in the visual imagery of all the military command and control systems closing down. These are high...
Look at the word lockdown. You know what the word lockdown, it can mean that the solar government locks down or completes its effort to get complete control, and it gets it. But also lockdown means, in prison jargon, when there's a riot in the prison, the warden will implement lockdown, where he takes the rioters and puts them back in the cells, and then doesn't let them get out for days. That's lockdown. That's stopping. Lockdown Bob rule means locking down Bob, who is the 220, BOB is 22, the 220-year cycle, and you stop the riot that's been going on while the media fit the Battle of Jericho. So lockdown, it does imply a finishing and removal of the anarchy.
I mean, we've lived so much with McLuhan that we know that things are pushing to a flip. We know there'll be a flip where there will be no military, no industrial complex, no medicine as we know it. You know, we live knowing that all these things are going to be totally upheaval. So it's, I mean, if you were...
Everything's disappeared.
Yeah, everything's disappeared. Yeah, if you were in doubt of that, you've never asked us, well, what do you feel about, you know, where's the military going to be in your world vision? It's not. It's just not going to exist.
Okay, and here's where I come in. I say, look, okay, well and good. But your vision of, you're envisioning what I call the PME, the post-military era. You don't call it that because your primary point of emphasis is not the demilitarization. I mean, it's a lesser included subcategory. But I'm saying practically the entirety of the resistance to demilitarization is the military in its five appurtenances, which is the uniformed military, the industrial military, the manufacturers of weapons,
I have it right there.
the military intellectuals, the think tankers, the military pals, they're in the pocket of all these others, and then the veterans and groups like the Air Force Association. Those five branches in the veterans are all the military, and and they're in their aggregate, they're undoubtedly the most powerful grouping on planet in most countries. So, I mean, to talk in other languages, in other verbiage about what amounts to, as you say, a post-military era, and not use that word, and then assume the denouement, or the virtual blitzing out, zeroing out of this military octopus, and not refer to it in any specifics, like the Pentagon going closed, like the Kremlin going closed, like the zeroing out of the military budget. I mean, these are profound, quake-causing changes that have to come down, and for an analysis that you know, refers to it obliquely is not a pointed analysis.
No, I say everything's disappeared, and that includes the military. Everything is disappeared. They've disappeared.
Okay, but do you understand my problem of being one a little bit more technically into...
You're the guy living in the past. Okay, go ahead.
Well, but do you understand what my problem is?
You still think they're there.
In other words, if you think towards the post-military era,
yeah,
why do you avoid the confrontation with eliminating the military, which has to be done?
They're the causes.
And you know, as Carolyn says, people with guns aren't going to give them up, and yet, paradoxically, that is our task on planet, is to get the people with the guns to give them up.
That won't happen until 2012.
Well,
but the effects precede the causes. The effects are 1990.
But is this God out of a timeline or something? I mean, so you've obeyed... Yeah. There's a defective way of thinking that some people use. I found myself using it, where it's really just procrastination. But where you put off and put off, like, one day I'm going to write the world's great novel or something, but not today, I've got to go fishing. You know?
Yeah. No, I don't do that.
And I don't do that.
We've been on the
I'm
public
working
for
on
years.
Breaking down the medical industrial complex, and I leave everything else to Bob. Yeah. On a daily basis, we are fighting our way through
the gun holders. AFNRA, NRA, National Rifle Association.
But the problem is, a certain military interest, perhaps, I mean, military medical or military biological warfare units or something, might really want to support your work for some strange reason, if only to find out how to co-opt it.
Right. Well, that's what we're dealing with. That's why you got to use, you know, use metaphors.
And so it might become expedient, or conceivably the only route in your assessment at that moment, is to go with the military. I mean, I don't know if you are...
I doubt it very, 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 very much.
Okay, that sounds pretty
See, that's
sincere.
That remains to be seen. But I'm already predicting the decision that we take.
But this system that I say we need to...
dismantle.
Right. Has a way, I mean, in history, it has a way of co-opting, either exterminating outright.
It's already happened with my technology, where people have tried to come in and buy it out and say, well, we'll fund you if you will. We're not falling for that sort of ploy. You know, we know what's going on, and we know we have to infiltrate and provide something in place of. You can't just whip things out from under people. You have to give them something.
Which is a placebo, in a sense, metaphorically. The placebo effect, which is what I mean when the effects precede the causes. Peace is here, effectually, but the causes are being worked out, and I predict they're worked out by 2020, and you're seeing it happen. You've got to get on board. You're doing your part.
Personally, I get, you know, I don't sit in on all of Bob's talks. I'm in and out and that. I'd rather be doing something. You know, I don't like to talk. I don't talk a lot.
You only talk when you get on the media and something's and you have something to say about what you're doing.
I put my energy into doing.
And then talk when it's a maximum effect.
True worth is in being and not seeming, in doing each day that goes by some little good not in dreaming of great things to do by and by.
Right.
All right, who's that? Is that you write that, or is that a quote?
Author unknown, but
Okay.
I remembered it from my childhood. Always
Oh,
had
very
it.
good. That's a scientific statement. That's a fact.
So I plod along day by day, make a new formula, make a new contact, you know, train a new doctor, and I have the the hope and dream of the larger thing at the end of the rainbow.
Oh, far to play. Okay.
But I'll work toward it.
Yeah. Now here's the point. In the interim, waiting for Bobo, waiting for Godot, waiting for Bobo, is Marshall discovered that thinking is doing. So Bob is doing as much as Connie, but he's providing content for the waiting interval of media, software, blah, blah, blah. You know, so the thing is, so I know that I'm doing as much as Connie, but she represents the body as doing, and I represent thinking and talking, and media content is doing. Both are hand in hand. She's Connie, ALP, and HCE. See, they're the grounds. One half the stage, the other half. The actors are Shem, Sean, and Issy, our children.
Thinking is doing.
You're one of our children.
Oh, hey, Daddy.
Yeah. And we want you to get a job now, Phil. We want you to leave the family,
Can I have
stand
some
up on your own, and stop living in the past.
Can I have some GCD?
Yeah.
Well, see, I told you this elderly lady, she's 103, and she's.
Yeah.
she's
That's
her.
me.
That's Connie.
That's me.
But this sequence takes place in the time after the
Yeah.
disarmament.
Well, she'll be alive then.
Takes place about
Yeah.
70 years after the disarmament.
Yeah, that would be 2082. She'll be alive still then.
And this elderly tour guide through the Museum of the Millennium.
Who is Finnegan's Wake predicted that. That's what Finnegan's Wake's a museum, and the main theme is the Kate the Slop woman who takes the people through the tour. It shows the history of militarization. That's right in Finnegan's
Well,
Wake in the first section.
Then you should design your own tableau in the museum. In
For
other
that
words,
museum?
i-
For
i-
that one?
In the Museum of the Millennium.
Yeah, I should offer
If
to
you,
submit a
if
piece
as
for
you
it.
say, you are part
Yeah.
of this plan on planet
CD-ROM.
Yeah.
to demilitarize.
That's our
and-
CD-ROM.
Good. That would work.
Yeah.
And you know, Carolyn too. I mean, maybe probably you guys will occupy. But you've got to write the placard. Think what the placard says.
Yeah.
Here,
Well, it might show this
here
chart.
you see
I think it show these charts.
Bob Dobbs.
Yeah.
But then what to say, alias or any whatever,
Yeah.
whose contribution to the general disarmament of
Yeah.
our planet was,
Boom, the charts. And yeah, that's right.
and then the explication
Yeah,
of
the
the
chart.
chart.
Yeah. Which will be the CD-ROM. You plug in, you spend
Well,
many hours, going
Look,
through it.
this little plaque is little children. It's only a short paragraph.
Yeah.
Can you make
Oh,
it?
I can make a short summary, no problem.
What, can you give us a first rough cut on what that short summary might be?
What do I do next, Carolyn?
No, it'll be Finnegan's. Here's what it'll be: Finnegan's Wake dash, and the dash indicates who said it, right? And the person who said it is Uncle Meat. So it'll be Finnegan's Wake, and they'll see Uncle Meat, 1977. That'll be it in the distillation. Uncle Meat said Finnegan's Wake in 1977. That'll be my little distillation of it. Remember, Wake is the death of Finn. Finn is this, the history of war and the thing that the devil, the whole militarization thing that's blinded humanity for millennia.
Tell me this. Since I've only gotten to what page am I on in Finnegan's Wake?
18,
By the time, how many pages are in that book?
628.
On page 628, am I in a demilitarized planet?
Yeah. That's what he predicts. Fission precedes fusion. This is fusion, the general
Wait
disarmament.
a minute, slow down.
Oh.
Did you said yes in that book? The okay, Humphrey Earwicker.
He stops in mid-sentence. The book doesn't end with a period. It stops in mid-sentence.
But did
Now the
Humphrey
message is
Earwicker-
not to go back in the cycle, but that it's been aborted. The disarmament will come. That's the flip point. It flips so surprisingly that the rifle guys are caught disarmed. Caught disarmed.
I mean, the thing back to Mara, what I read in the headlines today was, surprisingly, the public wants to go back and investigate life on Mars. Whereas before, public opinion had, forget it. The public can turn on a dime.
Yes, that's a good point.
But I always have to take exception when you wave away
Oh, I didn't
the
wait for
process of demilitarization.
Oh, no, that's what this period, 1990, 2020 is.
See, because the key to it is there's going to be a reaction,
Yeah.
area response,
Right.
or there will be killing.
There's the war. There it is,
It
Phil.
will be political.
Satellite laser beam versus homeopathic cliche probes. That's the battle. From 2020. That's the process.
Well,
Lockdown Bob rule
one
manifest.
practically has to be you to understand that, or at
Yeah.
least somebody that's been.
Well, since we're still battling, wouldn't we? It's a war. Wouldn't we have a code? Even though I can't use the word war, right? It's a code. It's secret intelligence and part of this working out disarmament. Have you heard of Cushman's map? Cushman's map. You know, this is what you got to look at. Is get Ralph Abraham. You know Ralph Abraham? Right. He has a new book out. 2 years ago. Guy.
Oh, I know that he talks about all that history of
Gaia, Eros.
all the way back
Yeah.
to Egyptian and.
Gaia, Eros, and Chaos. Chaos, Gaia, Eros. All right. He ends the book with the technology they're using to just go through disarmament. It's called Cushman's map. Cushman was the cover name for a Russian in Russia in the middle 80s, and his real name wasn't there. And then he had this. I think he smuggled it out to the West. So Cushman's map shows a crystallization of the tetrad management process, which I say is the way to peace. And Abraham spells out how Cushman's map has been developed since '85 by several other people. And it's got the numbers 22 and 14 in it. And so if you go to a bookstore, look up that book, go to the last chapter and see Cushman's map, and he describes how they do what you talk about, how they get the warring parties together in the United Nations and between Russia was just up before the wall went down, and then how they use it after, how they get the parties together and how they create this incredible alchemy between them, which includes the factor of chaos, to get them to see a new way to disarm themselves in their conflict. Cushman's map, and I mentioned that in my...
I'm going to look at it because
Yeah.
I'm familiar with that book. I spent like an hour with it in the bookstore.
And you never got to the end.
Unfortunately, I did. But I'll go back and see if I can find it. I have since tried to find it again. It wasn't in the same bookstore. But, okay, I'll check
and
that.
I mentioned that, read my paper with that in mind. The first part ends with Cushman's map.
And again, you know, about the process. I mean, we're well aware of the process. I've had the medical military storm into my medical offices, you know, and suffered the ongoing consequences of that.
You mean?
We're well aware of having to protect New Year from being, you know, invaded and stopped. We're dealing all the time with the
process.
military process, the
Well,
facts.
Everybody of goodwill abuts against
Sure.
that.
So, you know, it's an ongoing process that we don't make a lot of. I've never mentioned that sort of thing, but it's a constant, you know, there's this constant hovering about of the helicopters, but why go into it? But it is happening.
Now, are you referring to, you're not referring to real Army helicopters? I mean, you're talking about more
The medical,
probably
yeah,
police
it's a
or
metaphor for the
food
The
and
chemical
drug,
warfare.
Food and Drug
The
Administration.
chemical branch of the warfare.
Yeah, they're all in this together.
Which is on my chart. I got chemicals there on the chart.
we are carrying the load, even though we, you know, I think you feel Bob appears too flighty and too, flings
Abstract.
things abstract or frivolous about what he's talking about. But you know, we're well aware of the seriousness, but we just don't.
That's not communicated at this point, and whenever you hear communications from us, like these past 2 weeks. Now that's because we feel it's important to talk about other things at this point in the process.
I was wishing I'd worn my shirt. I've been moving and packing and sorting through old clothes from bottoms of drawers. And I had this shirt. It's very soiled now, but it's really a cool shirt. It has this a graceful young woman on it. She's sort of wrapped in a banner. And it looks like it was done by, was it Fragonard, or who did that? that in the French Revolution, some painter.
Oh, the Sabina women or whatever it's called, the revolutions.
Yeah.
The women who were protecting their guys from the other guys.
Well, that would do.
Yeah.
And the banner says, and you know, she's
Yeah.
striking
Yeah.
some kind of a inspiring pose.
Yeah.
And the banner says, disarm.
Mm.
And that's what we need.
In the painting it says disarm, or on your shirt?
On the shirt.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, without overdoing this thing about you don't talk enough about disarmament, I mean, when are your moments when you go disarm?
I do it all the time. I did it at the Midnight Express, Midnight Special
Did
bookstore.
you?
Yeah, I told them they were all disappearing, and then you know what they said?
Wait, slow back. How
Slow
can that
back.
equate with disarm?
Because it got to the point where people said, I don't feel that I've disappeared, or, you know, what, we're in hell. And I says, yeah, you are, but I'm not. I'm in utopia.
Wait. I repeat my question.
Yeah.
You know, your epiphanies for disarmament seem to be few, where you blurt forth, disarm, goddammit! It's the only way to go. So it's the all important. You don't hit that note.
I don't say that word.
Well, you don't say that word.
But I certainly.
You're inhibited on that word.
No.
Culture has made
The
you inhibited
effective.
on that word because William Irwin Thompson, of whom you're quite fond,
No,
is one of the
I'm
few
not fond of
writers-
him.
Is one of the.
I'm not fond of any of the holy
you're
officers.
quite attentive to.
Right, because they're part of the process.
But more so than many other people.
No, they're symbolic.
You seem to be much more attentive to him.
No. They're
Well,
just put up there for flags for other people to notice,
No.
not for me.
Well, who are you?
Attentive to? You know who I'm attentive to? All the people I've been talking to during these 2 weeks. And they're not well-known public people.
But in any case, so again, my image of history standing behind and saying, don't look at disarmament. But that also means, you know, as well as see no evil, hear no evil, it also is got a hand on people's mouth. Don't say disarmament.
No,
Because history hasn't taught you to say disarmament.
You're talking as a specialist, though.
Yeah.
I mean, there are dozens of people that have come through. One person say, why don't you say, don't use mercury amalgams? Another one say, media fast. Another one says, you know, unchlorinate the water. We take all those 100 different topics or necessary things that have to be
Strategies.
dismantled and put them in a conglomerate.
I could
That's
say
what-
everything's disappeared.
Yeah, that's what Bob's saying.
It's a physical fact. Everything's disappeared.
Now, one can
They've been disarmed.
look. There's a psychological process known as reification. I'm sure you're
Yeah,
familiar with
yeah.
it, where you can take an idea and infuse it with so much energy and grant it so much godhead
Yes.
that it spins off into an existence on its own. And sometimes I wonder if you take these concepts like this date timeline or some of your numerous vocabulary
Yeah.
cliches to archetype
Yeah.
things, and if you don't infuse them with, if you don't reify them, let's just
If
think
I
of it in
don't-
those
you-
to reify something's not generally a psychologically healthy thing to do
Right.
because it's actually.
But you're saying that if you don't reify them, and see, where are you leading with that? I understand what reification means. What are you saying here? If I don't
well,
do that?
I'm just saying, I'm picking on you. I'm saying, Bob, are you perhaps,
Over reification?
are you letting some of your terms lead you around by
No.
the nose?
Because here's the important point, Phil. On this chart, it says anthropomorphic, sociological / psychological mask lag, culture lag. That is in 2012. But it's a culture lag situation because everything has disappeared by 1990. See, that's the culture lag. So what you're seeing now is...
Okay, now, for instance, are you reifying the concept that everything has disappeared by 1990? Because actually, in 1990, there was 1990.
Right, you know how I counter that? Because here's the symbol for everything's disappeared, all right? But me, I'm still there, or you, the reader, you're still there. So I'm contradicting, canceling out the reification of everything's disappeared. You have to include the causes and effect, causes merging with effect. You have to conclude the cancellation. of whatever reification you're doing within your chart. Just like the Persian mandalas would always have a little flaw hidden sort of in there. You would have to find it, but they show the incompletion of the mandala.
So there's a Thompson.
That's like a little flaw. Oh, you left that part out. The computer misprinted.
So there's a Thompson Street Guide. Every page of their numerous street guide, they have at least one road that's really quite wrong on there. So if anybody steals their map, they can find it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's how they. Well, that's another story. But the that's something actually I don't go into. But McCloy knows what they did to understand how they did that principle in understanding who was what Nazis were going underground and using fake passports. They used that principle, but I'm not going to go into it right now. To find out who was the real Nazi.
The true keeper of the
Yeah,
faith.
yeah, or you know, like in the Demjanjuk trial, they had that factor to know whether he was really the Iron Joe guard or whatever the name was for him.
Well, in this assessment of things past and coming, do you see a period of huge storm and strife? In other words, do you see something like
Worse than we've had? Worse than we have had?
Oh, a total repressive thing which generates an armed uprising here in lots of places. In other words, is that in your sense of...
I see it in some places on the planet, but not in every place. There will be autonomous zones, so to speak.
And who are the players in these autonomous zones?
People using mirror and fusion energy.
Oh, so autonomous zones are good things.
Yes.
But what about, I mean, are these hillbillies up in the countryside that, you know, they get off on guns and things so much? Are they apt to have right-wing autonomous zones?
No. They'll be using, the ones that use fusion will be part of the breakthrough.
Well, it's kind of hard for some guy out in the sticks playing gun club and marching around in camouflage to involve with fusion.
No, he'll buy a battery, he'll bring it into his house, and he'll say, oh boy, this allows me to have energy. It's like the guys out in the Montana militia. If they had a problem when they ran out of toilet paper.
Oh, you're talking about cold fusion.
Yeah, cold fusion. So when they get their fusion battery, they'll be able to have a standoff with the feds for a long time because they got cold fusion and don't need the basic energy principles. And then the hidden effect of that will be eventually they'll realize that other people are doing it and they'll start communicating with them and the federal government will become obsolete. And then they'll sort of realize, oh, we don't have to fight the battle anymore. Though they will keep their guns on them. And it'll be a 30 to 50 year process of gradual melting away. The reasons why their enemies, the images of their enemies will change.
What do you make of LaRouche's recent reiteration of his early 80s advocacy of SDI?
I think that I always I give LaRouche credit for being the prophet of cold fusion, conceptually and politically. Okay. Now on the militarized zone, on all his public statements about issues, he is compromised because he works for the Vatican and he works for certain military people in the Pentagon, or they're people who support the funding of his vast network. So as a Machiavellian entity, he has various people infiltrating him and working with him, and he has to work with them. Like any government, is never a simple agenda. It's multi-dimensional, so the president has to wear many faces for many different types of audiences. LaRouche is in that position, and he has to bring up the SDI because that factor that supported him and allowed him to back channel to Moscow in the early 80s are still need him as some PR for the decentralization and collapse of Washington, D.C. So yeah, that's something that he has to do. Now, whether he really it's like which faction that supports him does he finally identify with, that remains to be seen. But he has to play all his cards close to his chest.
Have you ever talked to him?
Yeah, the famous interview that Bob Marshall did with him was set up by me, and I was the one who taped it and organized it. And the questions done by Bob Marshall were presented to Bob Marshall, were written by me. And that's the famous, do you have that? Have you ever heard it? The 2-hour dialogue?
No, actually, now I think about it, I have heard you refer to it, but...
You haven't heard it?
I haven't.
But that's the public version. I've met him personally and been involved with him many years, but publicly that would never be on record. But the public record of that, of the kind of conversation we had, is the Bob Marshall dialogue with him, which was done in February, March '89.
And then he went into jail. So
He was in jail. He got sentenced on January 26, '89. He was in the Alexandria, Virginia detention center for 5 months. And during that 5-month period, because he was sitting still, the media could get at him, and he had nothing better to do, so he did 250 interviews. And Bob Marshall was one of them. But it was the best one, and the LaRouche organization sells that one as the best LaRouche interview.
I'm impressed with how many world political leaders he has lined up in his support.
Oh, he's a world. He's America. He's for the rest of the world. The media world is the media dream that's projected out through showbiz and news and information is not the world. Is not what the majority of the world relates to. They want to deal with an anthropomorphic American, and that's why LaRouche, their claim that he is the greatest American statesman today is true. He's involved. He is the only guy who's operating on a one-to-one basis with the rest of the world, third world and second world countries, and they all show up at his panels all the time.
Did you quiz him on his relation to McLuhan?
Yes, that was done first by Bob Marshall in 1985. Bob Marshall was set up. There was this was LaRouche is running for president in '85. He's got his momentum going. This is part of the reason why he got busted. He was peaking in '84, '85, and they set up a conference call with about 5 radio stations. And Bob Marshall and CKLN had like 10 minutes with LaRouche among all the other talk show people, and that was the question he asked LaRouche about McLuhan. And LaRouche said McLuhan. I mean, just summarizing, LaRouche said McLuhan was half right. And he gave him kudos on that point. But then LaRouche brought up his point, where he's right, the zone that McLuhan was wrong on, and he went into that in LaRouche terms. And so that was the first time Bob Marshall interacted. In '89, Bob Marshall then interacted for 2 hours. And McLuhan was not brought up too much in that one, because we had his statement on McLuhan already.
No, are you no longer Bob Marshall?
No, I'm not Bob Marshall, never been Bob Marshall. I'm Bob Dobbs, you know that. Bob Marshall is my colleague who worked at CKLN, who did the journalistic stuff from '84 to '87 before I showed up in '87.
What did LaRouche say about Bucky Fuller in the '89 one? Remember?
Yeah, it's hard. Let me just think. It was very good what he said. He acknowledged Bucky Fuller's contributions, and I knew through private conversations from LaRouche that he considered Bucky Fuller part of the British intelligence, and but he did not say that to Bob Marshall. And he was more generous to what he said about Bob Marshall because he was more aware of the public nature of the interview. And so, LaRouche is careful what he says in different contexts. He really sort of didn't go into it too much. He just talked about how he's aware of Bucky Fuller's works, and I can't remember that part, but it's be worth hearing again to just remind yourself what he said. But I know privately he considered Bucky Fuller an agent of Prince Philip. Maybe an unconscious agent, but in the long run, working for Prince Philip.
To me, he has this curious, his Anglophobia and his Germanophilia is kind of, I don't know if it has a racist root or what. I mean, he would tell you.
It has a metaphorical root because he's always replaying the centennial metaphor. So the 20th century, up to the point of confusion, is a replay of the 19th century or of 5th century BC Athens. It's always Persia against the Platonic city-state. And modern Persia in the 20th century is London. And the Greek city-state is the American, the Hamilton system in American tradition. So he's always replaying that thing. So when he says Britain does this, he'll sometimes call Britain is Venice, or it's Persia, or it's Rome. It's always the simple division between the oligarchic system, represented by Persia in history, and the Republican tradition, represented by Athens.
Yeah. Well.
So he always projects the historical fight, the battle, which is this part here in the middle, in those classical terms. He's the classicist, and therefore, when he's talking, he's not anti-Britain, British people, the little island and the citizens of England. He's anti the City of London and the financial fondi who have inherited power for centuries that now operate out of the City of London financial district. and that's Persia. That's the oligarchic system. And America, he thinks Americans per se are ignorant and really a corrupt civilization. But the historical image of America that Ben Franklin and Henry Clay and the people that he celebrates in American history over the last 220 years are symbolic of Athens, and that's America, the American system. But he doesn't mean the dummies that you see on going to game shows on TV or Jeopardy. So he says that's American political system, but it's a technical term within this metaphorical historical battle.
Is he on the ballot this year anywhere?
Yeah,
President?
he's here and there. I mean, the New Federalist reports it, and they like to exaggerate his successes, but you'd have to ask Charles. I don't follow it. He shows up in different places, wins. He's running as the Democratic choice, not against Clinton, but he's running to be a voice in the Democratic convention to make sure that Clinton follows the policies that a true Republican would do. You know, Republican in the historical Platonic sense, not the Republican Party. And so he always likes to get on TV in election year and put the ideas out, even as just to the point of targeting the Democratic delegates so that they can think clearly when they go to the convention and push the platform that LaRouche wants, that Clinton should adopt. But LaRouche apologizes for Clinton's backsliding because he knows that Clinton is the little American Athens against the huge London Persian Empire, which runs which goes from David Rockefeller to the Fowler, who runs the Democratic National Committee. That's the enemy, you know.
Well, that's a strange definition of British banking circles to extend over to political operatives in the.
Oh, that's the whole point. Britain is that, you know, he's got to use words to talk to us in political images, but they're metaphors. When he says stop the British, he means Dwayne Andreas. He means the multinational corporations. But he believes that their political power operations are run out of London because that's the free zone. That's the free trade zone among the power people. That's why Conrad Black, the great Canadian power broker, left Toronto and moved to London.
Well, in other words, does he think that these, I mean, it sounds almost like he's slipped a little upstairs to put so much energy, so much disapprobation on this British banking.
Well, that's because he's an artist. He's a poet. He's writing in modern poetic terms.
I mean, when you consider the vast power of Wall Street, the Eastern banking establishment, all those metaphors.
The British are Wall Street. Wall Street is British. And you're getting misled by the poetic metaphor of Britain, because this is the...
well, he just means monopoly capitalism.
That's right. He means the oligarchs. But since he doesn't agree with the left and the right and the center's traditional political analysis of the monopoly capitalism enemy, he's brought in new poetic metaphors to shift your eyes to look at it afresh. It's still the same problem, and he still has the same grievances they do, but as a poet, he's trying to update the language. And it does. For Charles, he had read the New York Times for 40 years, and when he encountered the language of LaRouche, the poetry of LaRouche, and involved in it, it took off his wipers. Now, I know. The point is that Charles is very enthusiastic about it right now, because it's like a great song, a great poem that has helped him and his assumptions to fall away.
Just remember,
and that's the usefulness of LaRouche's metaphor.
Charles is real enthusiastic about and hands out dog food as a nutritional supplement. So I mean, maybe
because he's wowed by LaRouche's metaphor, and LaRouche's metaphor is useful for some people.
It's impressive that one such as Charles has been seduced by.
That should tell you something, as Dr. Beater used to say.
It does, but I'm not quite figured out what.
Right, but I know exactly what, and I'm the expert on that, because that's why I'm bringing GCD.
Because when I read his newspaper, I say, oh gosh, he has a great position, assuming I'm against NAFTA. He's a great position there. Look at this, he's really for the minimum wage upping. He's really for most of generalized labor issues. But then look at here. Here he is talking up Star Wars, you know, and look at here. Here he's talking up maximizing U.S. population. I mean, really. Well, and then he's putting down Bertrand Russell as somebody who wanted to genocide people to reduce the planet. I don't know about that. It sounds way off to me. And And yet he's doing. I've spent my entire life thinking we're too numerous, that we're depleting, that we can't go on like this. And of course he's into this boat. Well, no, you just, when the engine's about to melt down, you don't slow down, you accelerate. You know. So I mean, to me, he's like just.
Yeah, he's crazy. He sounds crazy to me.
180 off. He does.
Yeah.
He is crazy. His policies for, you know.
No, I'm not saying he's crazy. He said his metaphor seems crazy to you, but the artist, like Zappa, always has to do something shocking and surprising. He has to work on your assumptions. The assumptions you're talking about, that Charles and all kinds of people who have good intentions worked on, needed to have their assumptions shaken up. So LaRouche comes in and says, no, let's have more people. Now, if you're not interested in understanding why he did that, you just dismiss him. But Charles started to read him, and you actually find there's an interesting logic to it. But you have to understand his logic.
Well, the logic, if I understand it, is that to create more plenty for all, you have to rev the machine, and to do that, you have to have more people, both be workers and consumers. It's
not consumers.
It's the growth curve. In other words, it's just.
You know what his image of the goal of revving the machine was? It was cold fusion. That's why he's a prophet of cold fusion. He said we push through nuclear, develop nuclear fission. Don't worry about it. That will flip into cold fusion. And so that was his metaphorical push. Go forward and don't be hindered by budget cuts based on population concerns or pollution concerns. Because when you get to the flip point, it'll make all those issues irrelevant.
Okay. Here's
general disarmament.
Here's what resonates with me.
Disarm now!
Yeah, LaRouche, disarm now.
There you go. T-shirt.
Bill, can I
Cold
interject
fusion now.
something?
LaRouche said cold fusion now for 30 years. That was his way of saying disarm.
As I understand it, parallel with the idea of population growth and density, you need to have, for that to work in his terms, you have to get back to a good, solid educational system, which we don't have. If we don't have that, population density is not going to help the situation. But I think he, if I remember correctly, was pointing to the idea, and I think Bucky Fuller agreed with this, that if you have a educated population and you increase the population density, you're going to increase the number of geniuses who can help you develop the new technologies you need to push through the problems that you've already created that are apparently insolvable at this point.
But in the context of not being forced to work to be given a guaranteed income, that was Bucky's point. If you take people off of the treadmill of the slaving of your survival to your enslavement to a job, that was his whole point, that you should have something like a guaranteed wage for everybody, so that all those who wanted to be geniuses could, and not be drawn down by the need to support himself and family. Bucky didn't say make more people so that you would have more geniuses. He said free the people you have from labor as you could by doing more with less, and by living over and not weaponry.
So it sounds like it's not appropriate for me to try to link Bucky's and LaRouche's philosophy together. I don't really know enough to be able to do that.
Because there's a disconnect. See, here are three other key ideas that give the lie to LaRouche in the most fundamental way possible and make him just a bad person. I mean, seriously, a malevolent influence. I've never met on the streets any of the street protesters that I didn't instantly loathe their style and their manner and their demeanor. I mean, they were so. I don't know. I don't have the word sets for it.
Square.
But when you spend your because
square, they're so square.
The opposite of that, of the LaRouchian view, is the following three things. You start with Schumacher's "Small is Beautiful."
Yeah.
That resonates for me. I forget the guy's name. Voluntary Simplicity. That seems like a wonderful thing. If practiced on a large scale, the direct opposite of revving the thing up. And then the deep ecological concept. Those three things: doing more with less, living voluntarily simple,
and with great respect for nature.
But putting nature above and before and some situations,
Yeah.
human.
That is exactly
assertions.
the opposite of LaRouche's agenda, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
and so the question becomes, which side are you on? And if you're on the other side, well, then it's simple. You can take that Federalist and light your fireplace with it before you read it, because it's more useful to create a humble, warm fire with and recycle
For one
it.
day instead of waiting for
But here-
fusion to get everybody a nice warm fire.
Yeah, I got your fusion right here.
Right, now the point is that since everything's literally disappeared, the argument between Bucky Fuller or any of those people you listed and LaRouche is over. That's why LaRouche is a homeopathic cliche probe.
Everybody
It's a
has
memory. It's a
disappeared.
memory.
Now here we are into one of your pet phrases where I always get the vibe that there's something, boing, pop, your springs are popping loose at this point.
Because I distillate all the homeopathic cliche probe action, and every one of the homeopathic cliche probes, which is the holy offices, do that to people. And I am giving you the effect that you get from when you read LaRouche, that something is disconnected. But I'm the concretization of that, and of course I will give you that effect, because I'm a homeopathic cliche probe myself. I'm the best of all of them.
I sincerely hope so. I sincerely hope it's exactly as you say. But I will straight out inform you that I have forebodings.
Forebodings of a stink leaking
I
up.
have psychic farts on the wafting your way.
you know you're picking up stinky farts coming from me. Or if you're not afraid of stinkness, you're projecting stink at me.
Actually, I was born with an inability to smell. I don't know
Oh,
if
okay,
you
you
know
have no
that.
problem.
So-
So that's why you can't understand me. You can't pick up the stink.
But he could hear
he's
it.
not discriminatory. Oh yeah, you can hear it, but he hasn't get the full synesthetic effect of it, of the old fart at play, which I am, being 74 years old. Do I sound like, yeah, Phil's there. I don't know whether to reach for my gun or to run. Jerry, where did you get this from?
Your bag.
Yeah, I knew it. Fuck, I realized it's 5 minutes ago and 2 minutes. The guy went through my purse.
I didn't have one.
Connie, do it.
I don't have one. No, I just
You
opened
went,
up.
open.
pulled
How'd
it.
you know where it was?
I just looked. Bob, don't get this on tape.
I went in my purse. You just looked, and what did you do? Where did you?
This may be a mundane point for you guys, but I haven't thought it through myself, and I'd like to hear your view on it. Problem that I see with disarmament and even fusion at this point is that it seems to me what fuels the military-industrial complex at this point are human appetites. And as Bob might say, as the American hologram is speeding around the planet and is subsuming the rest of the planet at this point, now we have China to contend with, and seems to me that these people, as a friend of mine mentioned to me recently, just to supply toilet paper to all the Chinese at this point will just about wipe out the rest of the forests on this
Wipe
planet.
out, is that pun intended?
Yeah. And with that kind of attention, with those people wanting to be brought up to date in the Western sense of the of lifestyle, the tension that would create seems to me would polarize the military-industrial complex all the more, create tensions, and it seems to me that the rate at which they're wanting to industrialize, even we bring in fusion at this point, it almost seems like we're going to burn the house down. And I would appreciate it if you would address my question first, Phil.
I think that's the nub of the question. When I say small is beautiful, appropriate technology, voluntary simplicity, and reverence for the earth or deep ecology, that's exactly, to do that voluntarily happens to people who look, as you do, at the toilet paper requisition for 1/4 of the people, the Chinese, and say, look, isn't there another mentality that we can inculcate into ourselves and others? Can't we all, like, slow down? Can't we reverse the direction?
Can we all get along?
Well, I know that phrase is so dug in. I know,
Yeah.
I heard that myself.
In your own mind, yeah.
People wake up.
Figure it out.
So I think you're right, because that is a spur to militarism, because rather than a nation starve, they will cross the border behind their armor and steal it. Just like China went into Tibet. You know, they needed the land. It was a Lebensraum situation. You know, they have a very tenuous claim on Tibet. You know, the CIA, most of the CIA that I'm aware of, was on the side of Tibet, presumably in 1949. So, what more can I say? Yeah, to disarm the world has many problems, amongst which is the LaRouchian view of revving everything up as a solution is precisely the wrong way to go. And his people show it. They're so hate-filled out in the street. They're so hate-filled. They're so... See, when I'm out there in the street, it's usually with past peaceniks and people...
Forget about the roof for a moment and address the question of China and their desire to become westernized.
There's a guy named not Harrington. He wrote a big essay, three quarterly issues of Foreign Affairs, and his first essay was called "The Coming Clash of Civilizations." What am I thinking of?
This was in the 90s?
This was...
last year, you were telling me about this, I think.
Yeah, just about 3 years ago.
Yeah, you told me about this.
Blank his name. He's a Harvard prof.
Yeah.
And you know, the coming clash of civilizations is like his metaphor for war with China, really. But civilizations, he defines, as basically religious organizations, meaning you got the Muslim civilization, you got Western technological / Christian civilization, and then you've got China. And basically, those are his three categories. And you know, Foreign Affairs, I don't know if it's ever given over 3 quarterly issues. You know, it ran for 9 months discussing this problem of the coming clash of civilizations. Well, the fuel of that clash is the aspirations of China in conflict with their neighbors, which in this case is us, the world being limited surface. So you may be absolutely right. This whole thing about disarmament or any kind of a workable world, it may prove the fatuous dream of fools who fail to perceive what you're looking at right now in all your mundane sensibility.
I would just rev up
to it.
the hemp making firms and make hemp toilet paper. What would LaRouche say about hemp?
Oh, is that part of? Yeah. That's part
well,
of.
Yeah, but the toilet paper, you know, is one minutia of consumerism, Western, you know, refrigerators.
So
and
he has not solved your problem.
All the rest of it.
He has the same concern as you have.
Okay, I'll put it this way.
Right.
Okay, here would be the GCD response.
Which is your response.
To any person who thinks in categories like I do, in other words, they see that the world now is not disarmed and they're aspiring towards a world that is disarmed. The one outstanding feature of a disarmed world is it pulls the plug on a lot of economic enterprise. For instance, all military industrial, it pulls the plug on. So that means eliminates the draw down on resources. I mean, I don't know if soldiers and sailors wipe their ass. I suppose they do. So I guess putting them in a civilian uniform, I don't think I'm making my argument here really cogently. I guess everybody's got to use toilet paper. The point is, if you posit a world without military, you're positing a world in which people have learned to live within their means without needing to despoil of their neighbors. Okay? Which, after all, is what war is about. War is stealing. War is an act of theft. War is this territorial aggrandizement is really stealing the property, stealing real estate. Is really what it is. And why the real estate? Because you want the resources, okay? But it's stealing. That's the central main thing that war is all about. You know, we learned with Hitler, expanded Lebensraum. We learned it from Japan with the co-prosperity sphere, which really meant he wanted the petroleum in Indonesia and all around in there, because Japan didn't have any petroleum. So, but if you don't have a military to need bunker fuel for those ships, for those airplanes, those things are gas hogs. If you don't have them, instantly this felt coming impending shortage of fuel tends to lessen once you're positing that you're not going to have this fuel hog military to fuel. And behind that, the fuel hog in industry to support it. So if all it, and then behind that, this is my contribution, this thing of reasons why you want to demilitarize the world, to save it from overconsumption, is because in the only world that we're aware of, the only world we've ever read of, and the world that I feel is putting its hands, well, maybe I will have to, maybe Bob has not got being blinded by the history, which...
As a result of our conversation today?
Yeah,
Okay,
you've moved me on that position.
Mm.
But, if you think about it, a world in which there is no military, if you think that that's where you want to go, you notice one other thing. People's appetites are less, because in a warring and a warrable world like we're in, you're made, they call you, the soldiers of industry, the army of labor, and this, the extreme regimentation of the labor unions and the workforce, even though in some ways through the computer it might be decentralizing to an extent, still in a warring and warrable world like we live in, there's a pressure on everybody to think about getting, taking. I mean, that's the key metaphor. You know, when you're in a country that whose security would fail without a strong defense, then people become defensive. Like I always break down and start crying when I think how horribly ruined our psyches are by the fact that we've all been raised to be killers and soldiers. But it's not only the immorality of killing, if such be, but it's beyond that. It's humanity's self-destruction in this warring way that they're in, where the warring way includes for civilians to go out and get. I don't think I want to take on the task right now to draw for you the outlines of why people, executives, school teachers, race car drivers, why anybody in a warring society is more avaricious and more acquisitive. But I do have it in various notes and fragmented forms, developed a proposition that in a post-military era, people will just, the nature of a person that has never been brainwashed to be a military, and where all around them is not military, and some great pressure is relieved. Part of that pressure is to play this game we call keeping up with the Joneses, or middle class ascension, or all of those things. All of that, I think, will kind of vanish. So right there is a whole nother game, aside from the literal military gas hog thing will be eliminated, and the industrial thing that supports it. So that's the GCD answer. For several levels, it decreases the consumeritisness.
Right.
Right, let
Well,
me-
I think I can anticipate that you're going to say with fusion we've already eliminated
No.
the gasoline machines and the consumerism on that
That's
level.
what I say. I want to point out something that you'd be interested in. You've expressed an interest in the evergreens. Tell you what the evergreens say about this question.
Evergreens?
Yeah, it's what comes through the medium. Where I interviewed, Bob Marshall interviewed Zappa.
Gotcha.
Right? No, it's part of the effects of language. It's not. It didn't get me there.
Why
I
the-
corrected it. The point is the point is that the medium that Zappa spoke through. All right.
The media that he spoke.
Medium. You know that the dead Zappa was featured in Flipside? Does he know
you
that?
mean your interview with Zappa?
Or Bob Marshall's interview with the dead Zappa.
And that's what I meant to
Yeah.
say. I
And-
corrected
Yeah.
myself.
The evergreens are the spirits that bring Frank through the medium.
Oh.
They're on the other dimension. So I'm going to give you
Evergreens. Got it.
evergreens,
Got it.
the evergreens position on Phil's topic. All right, Phil's issues. They say that for the first time in history, humanity is moving into a shared agreement that war is purposeless anymore. All right? They say that's going to happen, and that is happening. The world general consciousness has changed and is changing. So let's say it shows up by the year 2020, or maybe 100 years. But that's what they say. It definitely has. What he's talking about will happen and is happening.
Probably.
But here's an interesting point. They say, the point is not to be for peace. Now, there will be wars. The big change is that in society's hierarchical organization, everybody will have an opportunity to get those jobs. There won't be like the insider circle that keeps certain people away, which requires affirmative action policies. There will be no basis in the long run for affirmative action needs as we move into the 21st century. The person who is qualified will get the job. That will be a big change in history, which is a Larouchian principle. A big that's non-oligarchical. You're not just the position is not occupied based on wealth, status, or pull. They say, they're talking about in practical terms, the new 21st century will be a society where those who are the best qualified will get the job. And that'll be a major change in human history. Just like the services of war will no longer be apparent anymore. The disservices will change everybody. But the interesting thing they say, there will be wars, and they disagree with Phil. To talk about wanting peace is really to screw up that shift. That's what the evergreens say. I'm not saying that's my opinion, but it's very interesting. They say that Phil's talk here is counterproductive to what the situation inevitably is going to be. In other words, that you have to come up with a different metaphor, a different way of talking about what's happening than Phil's way to achieve what Phil importantly stresses. That's the evergreens view. Just for you who's interested, you should know
Okay.
that. And you're getting a big break that I'm telling you that here on tape.
I'd like to bring it back to my original question, though, because as several billion Chinese have opportunities to get the jobs, then they're going to want all the accoutrements to go along with those jobs: the refrigerators, the automobiles, the highways, and all the rest of it.
Well, they won't, but fusion will change that. They won't
But
need those technologies as much. They'll still use them, but it'll be more balanced.
Yeah, but
Ecology will have been established.
The impulse towards because television's been around as long as it has now, and it's everywhere, and it's getting.
But you're missing
It just seems to me that the impulse to have those things
the passing
may be
fanny.
greater than.
The Chinese are becoming Americans due to TV. But because TV is an obsolete technology, new technologies come in like cold fusion, every technology changes society. The Chinese are like that now because that's the way they respond to the present mixed media effect. But there will be a new mixed media effect in 15 years, and that will change the Chinese, and it will change their response to it.
It's going to change their desire for the comforts of the Western world.
As a matter of fact, probably China will be a glorious, if the Bible's right, that the Chinese will be the last race, the yellow race. People say that's in there.
What's
then
that
they're-
mean? the last race.
That's Bible talk. But the point is, the Bible, if there's any truth in it, points to the yellow race as the final occupants of the planet, the last supreme civilization. Probably the Chinese. I don't know. I've been told many people in the Bible. I don't know where it is. I don't even know if it's in there. But that is something that these people always bring up, and they see the Chinese as the Antichrist. But if that's true, forgetting the Bible, if the Chinese are going to be a successful race in the 21st century, they are going to adopt fusion energy. That's why they welcome LaRouche into their fold. And the thing is that the Chinese are, any backward society can adopt the new. The Americans got a problem because their oil consciousness, it's going to be hard for them to shift to fusion. But China will be one of the glorious cold fusion societies in the 21st century because they'll need it faster and quicker. And that'll change them. That's the optimistic way to look at that. You see what I'm saying? And the McLuhan principle is that you bring in a new technology, it changes people, just like America was changed by television.
Well, Karl Marx said that.
Well, that's why I said at the Midnight Special he was the greatest thinker in human history. Oh, you weren't there. I said that. Midnight Express? What is the name of that story? Midnight Special. That's what I said. A guy said, Bob, what's your view on Marxism? And I said, Karl Marx was the greatest thinker in human history.
Greatest thinker, that's...
But he's been, would you amend that now by saying he's been obsolesced?
Well, that's taken for granted. The statement itself is a homeopathic cliche probe. My answer was a homeopathic cliche probe in response to his homeopathic cliche probe question.
Would you define homeopathic cliche probe?
It's what's available after everything's disappeared.
Why was he greater than Charles Darwin?
Because he was political. He was a fighter. Disarm now! That's what he's for the people. Darwin was an oligarchical apologist and could be exploited. Marx was not exploited. Marx was a street fighter man. He was a Ben Watson. You know, he was a guy. Zappa was a Charles Darwin, and Ben Watson was a street fighting man.
In other words, the criterion for judging greatness of thought
is militaristic.
It seems like a contradiction. I mean,
Oh yeah, it's the past. It's not applicable now, but that's the way it was in the past when the fight was applicable. That's irrelevant now. It's all disappeared. That's why it's to say it is a homeopathic cliche probe.
I think it was a very
right.
Great,
that makes sense, doesn't it, Carol?
Great
Honey?
too.
10 more minutes of chaos by Bob.
Yeah, Bob's going in his whipping pose.
We
Sometimes I think we'll never die.
We only got 10
I'll never die.
We only got 10
Oh,
minutes.
no.
Yeah, Bill's
You
a-
could
saw it
Stephen
coming.
write the third volume of the trilogy?
That's right. I have an appointment with Morpheus, Phil.
I think volume 3 better be a comic book.
Yeah, well, that's what we're making, a little CD-ROM.
That's why I said tulips. Tulips, that's it. Close. Close the lips.
They're making a GCD-ROM.
Phil, it's the battle of the bands here, and I just might start pulling off some of my guitar riffs here, so you have an advantage if we shut down now. Otherwise, it's clarinet versus guitar, Phil.
I want to see some more dance steps.
Oh, okay. Let's have a dance. Let's end with a dance contest. Put on.